Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Great to have you here today on this Wellness and Weight Loss Wednesday episode for the 3 big takeaways, as well as all the different resources, research, studies, and links. Head on over right now to stephencabral.com/2539. That is today's episode number, and we'll be going over the 5 reasons not to go low carb this year. One of the reasons why I think this is important is because typically when people are setting resolutions or they're setting weight loss goals or they're looking to transform their body in any way, the first thing that usually goes is the carbohydrates. So they'll keep their fat high, they'll keep their protein high, but they'll reduce their carbs. And they do that, and I'm going to be honest with you because I always bring you information from an unbiased perspective, is that it works. So the amazing thing about going low carb is that you will actually lose weight if you weren't low carb right before you went low carb. So let me explain that. So if you've been following just a regular diet and you were eating 100, 200, 300 or so carbohydrates per day, and all of a sudden you go low carb, which is typically below 50 grams of carbohydrates per day, for some people below 25 grams of carbohydrates per day, what's going to happen is that your body is automatically going to start to lose weight for multiple reasons. So one, you're typically taking in less total calories. Okay, so that's one. Number two is that you're probably going to have better balanced glucose levels, right? All right, so that's number 2. And number 3 is that when you eat carbohydrates, your body's going to store more glycogen typically, and with that glycogen is some water. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing to hydrate the tissues, which is about 72% of your muscle is about water, and that's obviously vitally important. And the rest of the body as well. You can store glycogen, of course, in your muscles and your liver as well. So when we look at that, you say, well, that sounds pretty good, right? We want to lose weight, reduce calories, all these great things. So what's the downside? Well, let me just share with you. So what we do is we absolutely, and so I know that this is going to seem like a little bit of a, paradox or, I'm opposed to it in the beginning, but it's not. It's simply not. So we're okay. We've been helping people with body transformation literally since the 90s, the late 90s. So it's not like I don't believe in it. I do believe in it. I use it myself. So here's the thing, but it never lasts for more than 21 days. And the reason is that these things start to happen, which I'm going to share with you right now. So 5 reasons not to go low carb. And why don't we say this? Beyond a typical elimination diet, or functional medicine detox, or phase 1 of Fatlocity, or whatever nutrition plan you are using, all right? So this is for most people between 3 to 6 weeks, these 5 negatives start to set in. So again, if you're someone that wants to go low carb, again, I know it works. I agree with you. The data is there. But what happens is these 5 things. All right, so let's dive right into it right now and go over it. So the number 1 is this. So the first one is this. They're in no particular order. One isn't necessarily more important than another. But if you are going too low carb and you're dramatically dropping your calories and you're not getting enough protein because maybe you're doing a keto-based diet, you are going to lose muscle mass. You see this on weight loss programs all the time. So when I'm reviewing the research and I see people going through low carb diets who are not strength training, a lot of the weight loss is actually coming from muscle. That's a problem. I know that there's a lot of people out there who says, well, I don't really want the extra muscle. I get it, I understand. The problem is that if people are trying to lose weight, honestly, most of the time, because I've been in this profession a long time, it's not for health. I wish it was for health, but it's not for health. People want the body transformation, vanity-based results that come from it. And there's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't. It can be taken too far for sure. But if that's your choice, it's your choice. Like that's okay. That's who's to say whatever people want to define their body as, they can decide to do that in terms of how much they want to weigh. Now, there is a healthy weight range that isn't going to change. And the nice thing is there's about a 40-pound swing per body. And I've shared that on previous episodes. I'll try to link it up today if you head on over to 2539, today's show. And so what I want to share with you is this, though, is that you want to preserve muscle mass because it's your metabolism. I mean, it really is. So as you get older, you're losing about a half a pound of muscle mass minimum per year after about the age of 27. And it absolutely happens more to women than it does men. But the average is about a half a pound. Okay, 1 decade goes by, 5 pounds of muscle gone. Another decade goes by, you're, 45 or so years old. Okay, so now what's going on? You're 10 pounds of muscle down. That is a lot of metabolic processes. Now you're talking about a few 100 calories less per day than you can eat that you used to be able to, or if not, you'll gain weight. Okay, now another decade goes by, another 5 pounds. I mean, your body's ability to burn calories as energy, though, goes way, way down. So this is why you do not want to lose muscle mass. And so carbohydrates are actually muscle preserving. And I can hear, again, the detractors say, well, that's not necessarily true because you can convert protein to carbohydrates. And the answer is yes, you absolutely can convert amino acids from protein to glycogen or glucose, right? So, okay, I get it, I understand that, but it's acting the same way as carbohydrates. So why, if you have to, why wouldn't you want to spare protein and spare muscle and just eat some of the carbohydrates that protein is going to convert to anyways, even if it's just after your workout? Remember, carbohydrates are protein sparing. And if you have some in your system, most people, not everyone, I understand, not everyone, but most people are going to have more energy to get in a better workout or a workout at all. And if you're going low carb, you better be doing strength training at least twice a week, because if not, you're going to lose muscle mass. Again, the research backs that up. Really, really important. All right, so that's point number 1. Preserve muscle mass and metabolism at the same time. Number 2, if you go low carb and you are putting your body into more of a survival-based state, you are going to increase stress hormones and you are going to strain the adrenals to a greater degree. So whenever your body perceives stress, real or imagined, it increases norepinephrine, a stress hormone or neurotransmitter, as well as a glucocorticoid called cortisol. So when we do anything stressful, an ice bath, a sauna that's too hot, or a workout, which are all healthy for you, right? 100%. But if it's too stressful in the body, you produce more glucocorticoids. What does that mean? Well, your body actually breaks down stored carbohydrates called glycogen and brings them into the bloodstream. So it's almost like you just ate carbohydrates, right? Like it's the same thing. And the funny thing is, because that is what your body needs in order to cut cortisol levels, decrease the fight or flight based response. Carbohydrates are really the only thing that does that. So by totally eliminating your carbs and not even getting a little bit at each meal to kind of keep that and keep the balanced blood sugar levels, you're potentially straining your autonomic nervous system, your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight, to a greater degree. We see that all the time. Again, I don't do any guesswork. I just want you to know that. Like, my job is not to guess. I run a lab called the Stress, Mood, and Metabolism Test. It can be done by anyone right at home. It's a simple saliva test. Little blood spot from the finger to test thyroid, which I'm going to be talking about in just a moment. Get all your hormones. Estrogen, I mean, women become estrogen dominant. I'm not even talking about that today. But again, if you care about fertility, balanced mood, balanced menstrual cycle, not a good idea to go low carb for that long. Really not. Like 28 days, really that 4 weeks is the maximum we see from women. Men can typically go a little bit longer. From a biological standpoint, a reproductive standpoint, men can simply get away with going low carb for longer. They can. It's just, that's the way that the biology works inside of the body, because women's bodies, in terms of stress hormones affecting sex hormones, it's far more sensitive. And that's for good reason, because a woman's body is a body that carries on life, and a man's body is not going to be able to do that to the same degree, or to any degree, really, except for their own, right? So that's important that we look at that. All right, so that's number 2, is we don't want to overstress that fight or flight or the sympathetic nervous system, which stresses out our adrenals, that HPA axis. Okay, number 3, the third point is this. By going low carb, for more than even just a couple weeks, it shrinks the gut microbiome. That means it actually reduces bacteria inside of the gut. So this is why some people, when they go keto or carnivore, they start to feel better. Why? And I've explained this before, because they have an imbalanced gut microbiome. They have too much good and or bad bacteria, maybe even too much yeast. And so what happens is they shrink that. So they start getting less of the inflammation, less of the autoimmune, migraines, skin issues, etc. Well, again, you're using diet, though, as a conventional medicine pharmaceutical drug, essentially. You really are. When if you worked on the microbial balance, you wouldn't have to go low carb. Because what happens when you eat carbs again? Well, it just regrows in kind. So you never balanced it to actually get a better balance from bad to from good to bad bacteria. So this is really important. So if you go low carb for too long, you are absolutely going to disrupt your gut microbiome. You may lower your happy neurotransmitter levels, your serotonin levels that I spoke about on yesterday's show. And in general, you can begin to weaken your immune system, since a lot of that gut bacteria, believe it or not, actually has to do with the brain, the psychology, the happiness of the body, as well as the immune system. So I'd be very careful, again, like I said, going low carb, that's typically below 50 grams per day, okay? And the fourth point is this, lowering thyroid. This I see all the time, like literally all of the time. And the problem is that we just don't have enough lab testing out there for people, so they're not getting their numbers, right? And so they're doing a low carb diet and they're feeling great for the first month or maybe even 2 months, then all of a sudden they plateau. And now they start gaining weight and they have no idea why. And because it did not happen overnight. That's the thing. None of these things happen overnight. So what happened was, gradually over those past couple months, what happened? Shrunk the gut microbiome. The bacteroides, the Firmicutes bacteria are now out of balance. Doesn't help with you need those for fat burning, for mood, for sleep, or maybe our sleep was worse because we had higher levels of stress by going low carb, starting to lose muscle mass, and it's driving down thyroid because cortisol stress levels are going higher. So now metabolism's like, oh, well, we better slow down the amount of actual caloric need we need on a daily basis. So we're going to lower what? Well, we're going to lower, probably digestion's going to get weaker, circulation's weaker, cold hands and feet, drier skin, starting to get some hair thinning, hair loss, all symptoms of low thyroid. And so it's really important we look at that. And it absolutely affects women more than it does men. But again, you don't have to believe me. Like, you could just run a lab test to find this out. The lab test we offer all around the world is at stevencabral.com/hormones-test. That'll run the sex hormones, the cortisol, the thyroid, glucose, etc. But also you can run the same lab with an integrative health practitioner at integrativehealthpractitioner.org, or you can find a local naturopathic doctor. And so like any one of those works, but for sure, if you're dealing with these particular symptoms, there's always a reason why, and we just want to look at that. So again, going low carb for some period of time may be good. Going low carb for a longer period of time, most likely bad. All right, but we'll wrap that up in just a couple minutes after we go over this fifth one, and that is an overall desensitization to carbohydrates once you eventually add them back in. There are very few people, that meaning like less than 1 out of 1,000, that will actually maintain a low carb diet for life. Literally less than 1 out of 1,000 people are that disciplined. And I'm not talking about one refeeding meal per week. I'm not talking about that. That would be totally fine and even considered still a low carb diet with that one refeeding meal. Here's the problem. Most people are going to go back to eating carbohydrates. Like, that is the truth. It's just the truth. Like, all the people who have ever tried keto, all the people who have ever tried carnivore, all the people who have ever done super low carb, we all know that eventually you come back to eating carbohydrates, right? I mean, it's the most abundant, easiest food to get. It's a lot of the foods that we are attracted to in terms of taste, all these different types of things. But regardless, again, like, because you can get healthy carbohydrates, of course. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about eating, processed food here. But when you do return back, you will most likely, unless you do it gradually, which we'll talk about in just a second, you're not going to have the ability to process those in the right way. You're just not. You've shrunk your gut microbiome. You have less muscle mass. You can store less glycogen. Your thyroid is lower, so you can't even eat the amount of carbohydrates or food and calories in general that you used to be able to do before. And so, it's a disaster. It really is. And if you're spiking glucocorticoid levels, you never fix the blood sugar issue in the first place. So this is why I tell people that are promoting low carb forever lifestyles, it's a dangerous game to play for the general public. It really is. Because nobody's following low carb for life. They're just not. And so if we know that, okay, let's do something that is actually going to help people. So as a practitioner, I took the oath. I hope everybody else did that's a practitioner, is like, do no harm. Like, that's the first goal. So, okay, that means let's get people the results they're looking for, but do no harm in the process, right? So let's follow a 21-day plan that is lower carb, right? Equal Life Functional Medicine Detox, Equal Life Fat Velocity Plan, most programs elimination diet, right? Like it doesn't have to be Equal Lifes. It doesn't have to be. But those I know work because I've used those now with over 250,000 client appointments. So I know they work, right? But here's the thing. If you're going low carb in any way, shape, or form, you're following a book, you're doing great. No problem at all. Here's what you want to do though. After week 3, you need the plan to be able to gradually introduce carbohydrates little by little on a daily basis so that your body can become better adapted to using the glucose, to using the carbohydrates. And you can do that. And if you have gut issues, well, you can do something like the CBO protocol in order to be able to then add the carbohydrates that are not going to be fermentable in the gut that would then overgrow negative forms of bacteria and or yeast. So all of these things can be done. I have lots of free shows at stevencabral.com/podcast. And I'll even try to do some. So here's a show for you called How Not to Retox After a Detox. It's all free. I'll link it up at stevencabral.com/2539. And if you have any other questions, feel free to ask them right inside of cabralsupportgroup.com. Totally free group, private Facebook group. Ask questions. We're super supportive there. We have over 20,000 like-minded, health-minded people from around the world who simply, for the most part, I mean, they're just there to help. They're there to answer your questions. They're there to provide you with support. It's a beautiful group, amazing people. So hopefully today's show was helpful. Again, if it was helpful, please do feel free to share it with anyone you believe it could serve. Let us know if there's any questions. We are here to help. All right, have an amazing start to the year. Take care, everybody. Did you know that the body really only becomes sick or imbalanced in only 2 ways? Over time, you become deficient in vital nutrients, and you also accumulate toxins internally and from the environment. As those nutrients diminish and you increase your total toxic load, your body then begins to show the first signs of dis-ease. It's actually quite predictable, and the good news is that if we know how you began to fill up that proverbial rain barrel, we also know how to empty it to begin the healing process. I was fortunate enough to learn this ancient healing process from my mentor after suffering from debilitating diseases for close to a decade. It was only when I began to implement these techniques did I finally overcome my illnesses and go on to live a life of energy and vitality that I now enjoy. I'd like to share with you now what I discovered after traveling all over the world and how to combine the best of ancient healing wisdom with state-of-the-art science. Allow me to teach you exactly how I've been able to help over 250,000 people to empty their rain barrel and begin to transform their body and lives into what they've always hoped they could be. To get your copy of the international bestseller, The Rain Barrel Effect, simply go to stevencabral.com/rainbarrel.